Big Trouble in Little China didn't begin like a blockbuster. It began as a dare. Cowboys, kung fu, and Chinese magic colliding in a storm no studio could survive. But beneath the one-liners and the lightning, it was sorcery wrapped in mayhem. Heartbreak behind Gracie Law's emerald eyes. Beauty hiding battle scars. A cowboy script that slammed into Chinatown, where monsters and magic took over. And a box office ghost revived. Failure reborn as faith. These are 20 weird facts about Big Trouble in Little China. And buried beneath the neon and the thunder, smoke in the streets, thunder in the blood, the rise of a legend too wild to die. Number 1. Before Jack Burton swaggered onto screen, Kurt Russell turned down Highlander to reunite with John Carpenter, a decision that would push his body to the breaking point. Knowing Big Trouble in Little China would demand non-stop chaos, Russell trained like a prizefighter. Daily runs, weights, and weeks of martial arts rehearsals alongside stunt teams and co-stars. Every punch, flip, and pratfall was mapped out like choreography for an absurd ballet of demons and kung fu. But when filming began, Russell got hit with a brutal flu that nearly flattened him. Carpenter offered to delay, but Russell refused. So when you see Jack drenched in sweat after the brothel escape, barely standing yet still cracking jokes, that isn't acting. That's Russell, feverish and fighting through every frame. He could have taken sick leave. Instead, he turned sickness into swagger, pain into personality. The flu didn't stop Jack Burton. It became him. Fever, fatigue, and sheer defiance forged one of the most gloriously human heroes of the 1980s. Number 2. Kim Cattrall brought sharp wit and fearless energy to Gracie Law, the fast-talking lawyer who walks into chaos like she owns it. But behind that signature confidence was a quiet battle she fought every day on set. Carpenter wanted Gracie's eyes to be a vivid emerald green, a mystical contrast to the film's smoky palette. To achieve it, the costume team fitted Cattrall with thick-colored contact lenses, early prototypes made from rigid plastic. They were stunning on camera. Off camera, they were agony. The lenses scratched, fogged, and dried her eyes so quickly that her vision blurred between takes. Crew members often had to dim the lights and wait 15 minutes after each fitting while her eyes stopped watering. You could see the pain, one makeup artist recalled, but she never broke character. Cattrall refused to complain. Whether dangling over Lopan's lair or staring down demons, she kept her focus locked, even when her vision wasn't. The irony was poetic. Gracie's piercing emerald eyes, symbols of determination and courage, were born from real pain. Every look of defiance on screen came from an actress literally fighting through tears, proving that the boldest heroes in Big Trouble in Little China weren't just the ones throwing punches, but the ones who kept their eyes open through the storm. Number 3. To capture Big Trouble in Little China's underground world of sorcery and chaos, production designer John J. Lloyd didn't just decorate a set. He built an entire city beneath one. Deep inside Fox's sound stages, he constructed a full-scale Chinatown complete with 3-story pagodas, working neon signs, waterlogged tunnels, and trapdoors for stuntmen and wire rigs. Even the sewers were functional, flooded with recycled studio water and lined with rubber snakes to make them squirm on camera. The sheer scale pushed the $25 million budget to its breaking point. But Carpenter refused to shrink his vision. He wanted the world to feel alive, not fantasy, but a hidden civilization humming beneath Los Angeles. Crews worked around the clock, sweating through fog machines and exploding pyrotechnics to keep the illusion breathing. When the cameras rolled, the set didn't just hold the action. It became a character of its own. Every flicker of neon and echoing corridor made viewers believe there really was a Chinatown under the streets, and that somewhere Jack Burton was still driving his truck through it. Number 4. Before Dennis Dunn took the role of Wang Chi, the real hero of Big Trouble in Little China, John Carpenter wanted Jackie Chan. The idea was perfect. Chan's charm, acrobatics, and comedic timing could have turned the film into his American breakthrough. But 20th Century Fox grew nervous. Chan's English wasn't fluent, and after The Protector flopped in the US, the studio refused to take another chance. Carpenter reluctantly moved on, casting Dunn instead, a choice that ended up being pure fate. Dunn's balance of humility and fire anchored the movie, giving it heart amid the madness. Still, Carpenter never forgot the what if. Somewhere in another universe, Jackie Chan might have been the man who saved Chinatown, with one perfect kick and a grin. Number 5. In a decade ruled by muscle-bound saviors, John Carpenter did something unthinkable. He made his hero useless. Jack Burton wasn't a warrior. He was a talker, a swaggering truck driver who strutted like John Wayne, shot like Elmer Fudd, and somehow stumbled his way through destiny. Carpenter and Kurt Russell designed him that way on purpose, a parody of every 80s action archetype, the guy who thinks he's the star but really isn't. While Jack bluffed, bragged, and accidentally knocked himself out during battles, his friend Wang Chi did the real fighting, the flips, the swordplay, the actual heroics. It was a brilliant inversion of Hollywood's macho myth. The white lead wasn't the savior. He was comic relief caught in someone else's story. Russell leaned into the absurdity, channeling equal parts bravado and clueless charm. storm. Every line, from "it's all in the reflexes" to "what the hell?"
It's all in the reflexes. What the hell?
Turned ego into comedy. In the end, Jack Burton didn't save the day by being the best. He survived by being himself, a lovable loudmouth proving that even the wrong man can still end up in the right adventure. Number 6. Before the cameras rolled, the biggest battle wasn't in Chinatown. It was in the studio boardroom. When John Carpenter pitched Big Trouble in Little China, 20th Century Fox wanted a proven box office name to carry the chaos: Clint Eastwood or Jack Nicholson. Carpenter pushed back hard. He already had his hero, Kurt Russell, his creative partner from The Thing and Escape from New York. Executives scoffed. Russell wasn't a bankable star, they said. He was too blue-collar, too offbeat, too ordinary to headline a fantasy epic. But fate intervened. Eastwood and Nicholson were unavailable, leaving Carpenter free to cast his friend. Russell slipped into the tank top, fired up the Pork Chop Express, and swaggered into cult history. Jack Burton wasn't invincible. He was human, flawed, and hilariously overconfident. That was the genius. What Hollywood saw as a risk became the film's soul, a new kind of hero who stumbled, failed, and somehow still saved the day. Number 7. Before kung fu magic and neon chaos lit up Chinatown, Big Trouble in Little China began as a Western. The original 1982 script by Gary Goldman and David Z. Weinstein was set in the 1890s with Jack Burton as a wandering cowboy who rides into San Francisco and loses his horse to thieves. The plot? Nearly identical. Ancient Chinese sorcery, kidnapped women, and a showdown in the underground, but dressed in spurs and six-shooters instead of leather vests and Uzi jokes. When John Carpenter signed on, he loved the bones of the story but not the setting. He brought in screenwriter W.D. Richter, The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, to drag the story out of the Wild West and into modern America. The horse became a truck, the saloon became a Chinatown dive, and the gunfights? They turned into martial arts mayhem beneath flickering neon. By fusing pulp western swagger with Chinese mysticism and 80s bravado, Carpenter turned what could have been another dusty period piece into something electric, a modern myth roaring down the highway, driven by a cowboy who traded his horse for horsepower. Number 8. When Big Trouble in Little China was greenlit, John Carpenter discovered his biggest competition wasn't another action film, it was Eddie Murphy. Paramount was fast-tracking The Golden Child, another fantasy comedy mixing American swagger with Eastern mysticism. Both studios wanted to be first. Fox panicked. They rushed Carpenter's schedule, slashing prep time and forcing the crew to design massive sets, choreograph kung fu battles, and shoot supernatural effects at lightning speed. The cast barely had time to breathe or sleep between setups. Carpenter joked that every day felt like fighting a ghost with a stopwatch. But the gamble paid off. Big Trouble hit theaters 5 months before The Golden Child, beating Murphy's film to the punch. Ironically, both movies explored the same East meets West chaos. But Carpenter's version, stranger and riskier, became the one that endured. It may have lost the box office race, but it won something better: cult immortality. Number 9. By the time Big Trouble in Little China rolled around, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell had already forged one of cinema's great creative partnerships. From Elvis to Escape from New York to The Thing. Together, they'd built a rhythm few director-actor duos ever find. Their shorthand on set was instinctive. Carpenter gave a nod, Russell knew the beat. They trusted each other completely. And though Big Trouble marked their 4th collaboration, it also marked a turning point. It would be their last great ride before Hollywood politics and studio fatigue pushed Carpenter away from big budgets for nearly a decade. What began with a king, a convict, and a creature ended with a trucker, their wildest storm, and their last one for years. Number 10. Originally, Big Trouble in Little China opened with Jack Burton barreling into town, confident, clueless, and ready to roll. But when Fox executives saw early cuts, they panicked. Test audiences didn't get Jack. He wasn't the hero they expected. So the studio ordered Carpenter to film a new prologue, the scene where Egg Shen sits in an interrogation room, insisting Jack Burton is a great man. It was damage control disguised as storytelling. Carpenter called it unnecessary, even insulting, but he shot it anyway. Ironically, the added scene ended up enhancing the film's myth, setting up Jack as the accidental legend he was never meant to be. Number 11. James Hong didn't just play Lo Pan, he built an archetype. With his centuries-old curse, razor wit, and glowing eyes, the ancient sorcerer became the blueprint for every mystical villain that followed. From Mortal Kombat's Shang Tsung to anime overlords and video game bosses, echoes of Lo Pan are everywhere. Hong brought layers to what could have been a cartoon. He He improvised lines, added sly humor, and turned menace into personality. Even under pounds of makeup, his performance pulsed with life, equal parts evil, exhaustion, and charm. Carpenter once said, "James made Lopan funny and terrifying." 40 years later, that balance still defines cinematic villainy. The day one actor gave ancient evil a smirk. Number 12. Fresh off Ghostbusters, visual effects legend Richard Edlund and his Boss Film Studios team brought their supernatural chaos to Big Trouble in Little China, using rigs, lighting tricks, and the same optical techniques that gave us the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. They turned Chinatown into a kung fu underworld. Lightning gods, levitating swords, spectral warriors. It was Ghostbusters tech, rewired for wuxia fantasy. Edlund later joked the movie was half Ghostbusters, half kung fu, all madness. The crew even repurposed ghost trap mechanisms for Lopan's spirit effects. It was one of the last major blockbusters to rely on practical VFX before CGI took over, and every bolt of lightning still crackles with handmade magic. Number 13. John Carpenter wasn't just directing horror and action. He was living his rock star dream. For Big Trouble in Little China, he didn't hire a band. He was the band. Alongside fellow filmmaker musicians Tommy Lee Wallace and Nick Castle, he formed the Coupe de Villes, and they recorded the film's official theme. Then they went even further. Carpenter directed a music video for it, a glorious neon fever dream featuring the trio playing synths in trench coats surrounded by fog machines, strobes, and pure 80s sincerity. It's campy, chaotic, and completely self-aware, the perfect musical echo of the movie itself. For a film that never knew when to take itself seriously, the music video was its final wink to the audience. Rock and roll sorcery at full blast. Number 14. After Big Trouble in Little China wrapped, the massive Chinatown set, with its glowing altars, carved dragons, and misty corridors, didn't get torn down right away. A few years later, it was reborn under the spotlight of pop music. In 1993, Janet Jackson used the same set for her steamy If music video. The mystical palace that once hosted sword fights and sorcery became a temple of rhythm and light. Fans of both projects later spotted familiar pillars and staircases hidden behind Jackson's choreography. It was the perfect reincarnation. The supernatural heart of Lopan's lair, transformed into one of pop's most iconic dance floors. Number 15. After Year of the Dragon drew protests for racial stereotypes, John Carpenter made a promise. His next film would celebrate Chinese culture instead of exploiting it. Working closely with Asian American consultants, he made sure over 90% of Chinatown's characters were played by Asian actors. The result was one of the most inclusive ensemble casts of its time, a rare feat for a mid-80s studio film. Actors like Dennis Dunn, Victor Wong, and James Hong weren't just background faces, they were leaders, warriors, and wizards, the true heroes of the story. Big Trouble in Little China flipped the Hollywood formula. The white protagonist was the fool, and the Chinese characters were the ones with power, skill, and dignity. Number 16. When Big Trouble in Little China wrapped, John Carpenter thought he'd made lightning in a bottle. Action, comedy, kung fu, and chaos all fused into one. But Fox didn't know how to sell it. Executives panicked, unsure whether to market it as fantasy, martial arts, or pure action. They chose wrong. The posters made Jack Burton look like a traditional tough guy, hiding the film's humor and heart. The trailers ignored the weird magic entirely. Carpenter later joked, "They spent more on Crocodile Dundee's poster than on our entire campaign." When Big Trouble hit theaters, audiences had no idea what it was, and it vanished after just a few weeks. The failure wasn't creative. It was corporate, a comedy about chaos undone by chaos at the studio. Number 17. Big Trouble in Little China may have bombed in theaters, but the real storm was just gathering. When it hit VHS and late-night TV, something strange happened as fans found it. Word spread through video stores, college dorms, and midnight screenings like an underground spell. Jack Burton's swagger, Lopan's madness, and Carpenter's neon-soaked chaos became rites of passage for every misfit who loved movies that didn't fit the mold. By the early 90s, Big Trouble wasn't just a cult film, it was a cult. Fans quoted Jack's monologues over beers, wore Pork Chop Express shirts, and gathered for marathon screenings. The movie that Hollywood didn't understand had found its tribe, a legion of believers who saw genius where the studio saw failure. In true Burton fashion, it lost the battle and won the war. Number 18. After Big Trouble in Little China found new life on VHS, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell started dreaming of another ride in the Pork Chop Express. The idea was wild. Big Trouble in Old Japan, where Jack accidentally awakens ancient samurai spirits and stumbles into a new supernatural war. Carpenter wanted to take the character global, mixing East meets West mythology with even bigger chaos and laughs. But Fox still saw the film as a financial failure and refused to fund a sequel. The truck stayed parked, and Jack Burton's next adventure never left the notebook. Decades later, comics revived the concept, sending Jack into time-traveling misadventures. Proof that while Hollywood buried the sequel, the fans kept the engine running. Somewhere out there, the Pork Chop Express is still idling, waiting for the green light. Number 19. In 2015, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson announced his dream project, a new Big Trouble in Little China. Fans braced for impact, unsure whether to cheer or panic. Would it be a reboot, a sequel, or something in between? Johnson promised it would honor the original, calling himself a massive fan of Jack Burton. But when word spread that his version might erase Kurt Russell's legacy, the cult rose up in protest. Then John Carpenter weighed in, grinning but firm. "They better not mess with my truck," he warned. The message was clear. Some legends aren't meant to be remade. The project quietly stalled, buried under rewrites and reverence. In the end, the Pork Chop Express stayed parked, because some storms, once they pass, are better left rumbling on the horizon. Number 20. Jack Burton's truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of everything Big Trouble in Little China stood for: swagger, stubbornness, and sheer ridiculous pride. Painted with a flying pig and the words "The Pork Chop Express," it became an icon of cult cinema. Years later, fans rebuilt the truck from scratch, showing it off at conventions with working CB radios that played Jack's lines on loop. In Carpenter's world, the Pork Chop Express was more than a rig. It was a rolling philosophy. It didn't matter if you were outmatched, outnumbered, or flat out lost. You just kept driving. Because, as Jack would say, when the storm starts brewing and the lightning's flashing, you look that big ol' storm right in the eye and say, "It's all in the reflexes." Bonus fact: when Big Trouble in Little China flopped, it broke John Carpenter's faith in the studio system. He walked away from Hollywood for nearly a decade, retreating to smaller independent films. But the failure didn't end his influence. It multiplied it. Filmmakers like the Wachowskis, Taika Waititi, James Gunn, and the Russo brothers have all cited Carpenter's blend of absurdity, world-building, and genre-bending tone as inspiration. The movie's DNA lives in Men in Black, Guardians of the Galaxy, Everything Everywhere All at Once, all stories that balance spectacle with strangeness. Carpenter didn't just make a cult classic. He built the blueprint for the modern blockbuster: weird, funny, self-aware, and endlessly rewatchable. Big Trouble in Little China may have bombed in 1986, but in the long run, it won the war. By the time the Pork Chop Express rolled off into the storm, Big Trouble in Little China had already broken every rule in Hollywood. It flopped first, but only because the world wasn't ready. Carpenter's wild fusion of kung fu, fantasy, and comedy would go on to shape decades of storytelling, proving that tone could be a weapon and weirdness could be power. It was never just a movie about magic in Chinatown. It was about believing in the impossible, even when the odds looked insane. If this one still makes you grin at the chaos or quote Jack Burton in traffic, drop a comment. Tell us what cult classic we should truck into next, because sometimes the biggest trouble leads to the best legends. And if Jack Burton taught us anything, it's this: when the world gets strange, grab your truck, crack a joke, and hit the gas.